Mr. Hensarling, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I'm hearing some things that are somewhat surprising to me, so I want to make sure my ears do not deceive me. I'm sorry that Chairman Frank isn't here. I know he went to another hearing. I thought I heard Chairman Frank say that essentially his vision of the resolution authority would constitute a death panel and end in dissolution. And then I thought I heard you say that you would not necessarily use the chairman's language. So does that mean that...
I only meant the phrase death panel.
Okay, so essentially
but on the
under the
objective and strategy...
But under the administration's plan then, a conservatorship versus a receivership would still be on the table. Is this correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. It appeared that
but again,
maybe the chairman was going in a different direction.
But let's make sure people understand what the choice is. The rationale, remember what we're proposing to do is to take a regime that was set up, a process that was set up for small banks, for banks and thrifts, that existed for more than 20 years, set up in the wake of the S&L crisis, to make sure the government has the ability to come in and act to help restructure.
I think we
without
understand
cost
that,
to the taxpayer.
We understand that, Mr. Secretary.
No, but this is really what's important. So what we want to do is take that model and apply it to the largest institutions in the country so that the taxpayer is less exposed to risk in that context. Now, without that authority,
I have a limited amount of time. I understand the point. Something else that I thought I heard you say, I actually am somewhat confused after your answer to the gentlelady from California. Are mandatory standardized products, also known as plain vanilla, are they on the table or are they off the table?
But those are what was part of what we proposed in both our broad recommendations and our detailed legislative language. But, as I said, Congressman, we are very committed to trying to make sure that we find a balance that gets better protection for consumers without limiting choice and competition. And there are different ways to do that.
I understand that, Mr. Secretary, but it's a fairly simple question. In the original language that the administration submitted, it has mandatory standardized products. I'm just trying to ask, is that off the table? Are you now indicating there are other approaches?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
But hold on. I say that, again, these are judgments the committee's going to have to work through. And as I said, and we've always said, there are different ways to find this balance. But what's important, and I think you can see a test of this in the credit card bill that this body passed a couple months ago, of an approach that tries to find a balance that does not limit choice but gets better protection. The question is how best to do it.
Well, let's speak about balance for a second, Mr. Secretary. In your statement earlier today, you said that the administration's proposal addresses core regulatory failures and weaknesses that directly contributed to the crisis and the dangers that could lead to the next one. As many of us look at your proposal for a CFPA, we see something that is very broad, very draconian. As we read the legislative language, is it not true that ultimately Walmart, Target, and Macy's could be subject to regulation by the CFPA?
Let's do the simple objective and the simple imperative we share, okay? Which is if you are in the business of providing financial credit, that is your business, and you're competing with banks and thrifts who do that, there should be a common set of basic standards and protections. If you don't do that, then we'll have, again, what this country went through over the last 5 years, because what you'll do is allow one set of institutions to be subject to these rules, and all risk and activity will migrate to where there is no protection.
Okay, Mr. Secretary, I understand the rationale, but does that mean the answer is yes, that ultimately Walmart, Target, and Macy's, if they offer credit, can come within the regulatory ambit of the CFPA?
One of the great virtues of our system is these are judgments the Congress of the United States has to make, and this committee is going to have to work through.
But the language I'm asking you, Mr. Secretary, is the administration's
What we proposed is straightforward, black and white. We proposed it, and it's on the table, and as I said from the beginning, We are welcome the chance to work with you.
So if
in
these
this committee to
firms
try
are
to figure out how to get the
engaged
balance right.
in marketing a consumer financial product or service, then they could come within the regulatory ambit, not
If
unlike Starbucks, Chili's, Applebee's,
No,
rental car companies, Avis, Budget,
Congressman,
Enterprise,
I understand
every
what you're
CPA
doing.
in
I
America.
understand what you're doing. It's a reasonable proposition, the approach you're trying to take, okay? But let's just do the basic imperative. If you allow institutions that are essentially doing what banks do, to compete with banks with no adult supervision, no constraints, are free to engage in unfair deceptive practices, then you will recreate again what this
Do
country went through.
CPAs compete with banks?
Time of the gentleman has expired.